Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something I'm super excited about. We're diving into this incredibly dense, ancient excerpt to uncover what is, honestly, an absolute masterclass in strategic storytelling. We're looking at a tiny fragment from the Panchatantra. If you're familiar with it, you know it's this legendary, ancient Indian collection of interrelated animal fables. But we aren't just going to read it. We're going to completely dissect it. You'll see how, in just a handful of sentences, the author sets up this terrifying life-or-death conflict, pivots right into high-level strategy, and uses an absolutely ingenious narrative trick to keep us totally hooked. So, how exactly do you defeat an enemy who is much stronger than you? It's the central question driving this whole narrative. And, this isn't just some fun, hypothetical puzzle. It's literally a matter of survival. This single question immediately kicks off our journey into understanding how brains can triumph over brawn, especially in situations that just seem physically impossible to win. It's a completely universal problem, and the way this ancient text tackles it, brilliant. What's truly wild here is the sheer brevity of our source material. The text we're analyzing is barely 150 words long. I mean, you could read it in under a minute. Yet within that tiny block of text, we get full character development, a massive inciting incident, a strategic consultation, a deep philosophical doctrine, and the start of a completely new subplot. Talk about narrative efficiency, right? There is literally zero wasted space. Every single word is doing heavy lifting to push the strategy forward. Section 1, the banyan tree conflict. To understand how this text pulls off so much so fast, let's set the stage under this banyan tree, where the author cranks up the stakes in just the first few sentences. On one side, we've got a pair of crows, a husband and wife. They're just vulnerable parents trying to hatch their eggs in the hollow of a tree. Pretty relatable, right? Well, on the exact opposite side of this power dynamic, we have a black cobra. A deadly, creeping predator sharing the exact same living space, coming out of the hollow to consume their offspring. Right off the bat, we're hit with this impossible mismatch of physical strength. And that brings us to a genuinely chilling line. The author writes that whenever the female hatched her eggs, the cobra would climb up and make a meal of them. Ouch. Just notice the phrasing there. It's so dark, so unemotional, really highlighting the horrific cycle these crows are trapped in. It doesn't say this happened just once. It says whenever she hatched her eggs. It's a recurring nightmare. The casualness of the phrase, make a meal of them, perfectly captures the brutal indifference of the predator. To the cobra, it's just lunch. To the crows, it's absolute devastation. Section 2, seeking the jackal's counsel. Now, the natural instinct for any parent in this nightmare would be to just attack, right? To try and fight off the snake in a blind rage. But instead of fighting a physical battle they are absolutely guaranteed to lose, the crows make this fascinating strategic pivot. They head over to a jackal living under a nearby tree and state their problem super clearly. Friend, the black cobra creeps out of the hollow of the tree and eats up our children. Tell us, what can we do to protect them? They lay out the cold, hard facts, but more importantly, they ask for actionable advice. By bringing their despair to the jackal, the crows shift the whole narrative from an emotional panic, which, let's be real, would get them killed, to a calculated, strategic consultation. They realize that what they lack in physical power, they absolutely have to make up for in strategy. The jackal's response is immediate, and honestly, it's vital. He says, "Don't give up hope." Instantly, he changes the entire tone of the situation with just those 4 reassuring words. He drops a lifeline of wisdom into what was, until a second ago, a very dark and hopeless tale. He's validating their decision to seek counsel instead of just surrendering to the cobra or throwing their lives away in a completely futile fight. Section 3, brains over brawn. Having stabilized the crow's emotional state, the jackal moves straight to the theory of conflict resolution. And this brings us to the core philosophical lesson author embedded in this short exchange. I actually like to call this the jackal's maxim. The jackal states very plainly, it is a fact that an enemy can be destroyed by a trick. So the crucial takeaway here is that the jackal isn't telling them to go work out, get stronger, or build better armor. Nope, he's laying out a fundamental rule of asymmetric strategy. He's advocating for cunning, deception, and intelligence over sheer physical dominance. He's literally telling them that this battle won't be won by beak and claw, but by using the mind. He expands on this rule, telling them, an ordinary fellow, if he's cunning, escapes being overpowered by the strongest of men. This specific line brilliantly shows how the text views intelligence as the ultimate equalizer against unbeatable physical odds. And, notice how the text zooms out here. It zooms out from the specific animal problem, the snake and the crows, and suddenly applies the lesson to men. The author is totally winking at the reader here. It's a quick reminder that this isn't just a fun story about birds. It's actually a hardcore political and strategic manual for human beings facing overwhelming obstacles in their own lives.
Section 4. A story within a story.
So now we get to look at how the text hooks its audience from here. The jackal gave his advice, sure, but now he needs to prove it. And here we see the author using a classic, highly effective literary framing device to just keep us turning the page and deepening our understanding. Instead of just telling the crows what to do next, the jackal offers a case study. He says, a very greedy heron who was feeding on small, medium, and large-sized fishes was killed by a mere crab. I mean, think about the imagery there. An apex bird gets taken out by a tiny, bottom-dwelling crab. It is an absolutely bizarre matchup that sounds completely impossible, and the jackal uses this exact absurdity to prove his point.
This sequence perfectly traces the narrative nesting of the text. First up, step 1. We get the immediate visceral crisis, the crows versus the cobra. Then, step 2. We get the abstract, generalized strategic lesson, cunning over strength. And finally, step 3, we transition seamlessly into a brand new illustrative tale, the heron versus the crab. The author is using the second story as evidence for the first. It's just an incredibly engaging way to teach a lesson, wrapping a dry, textbook strategy inside a highly entertaining mystery.
And of course, the text leaves us exactly where it leaves the crows, absolutely dying to know the answer. The female crow is basically speaking for the reader when she asks, "How was that?" And the text simply ends that section with, "And the jackal told," mirroring the female crow's exact words at that cliffhanger. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to take away from this explainer. When you are totally outmatched, outgunned, and physically weaker than your opponent, how exactly did a mere crab defeat a greedy heron? It's a great reminder that no matter how massive the predator, there is always a strategic trick waiting to be discovered. Keep questioning, keep analyzing, and never assume brute strength is the only way to win.